So welcome to the first episode of Work Club Global on Air. I'm Dominica McGowan, and today I'll be interviewing Soren Trampedach, founder and CEO of Work Club Global.
So to explain Work Club, I have to go back a bit in time.
Yep.
I wrote the idea back in 2005, and the idea is really around diversity. So it's less about the space, but it's more about diversity. And it's coming from this theory that I have, which is a little bit fluffy, but it's a theory around Leonardo da Vinci. And so Leonardo, he lived in Florence in the early Renaissance period, when that was the center of the world in terms of new ideas, lots of cultures coming together, and lots of new inventions. And he at the time was very calculative around who he surrounded himself with in his local network, because he felt diversity in that network elevated the quality of his works. That's the short version. I think the relevance today, if you fast forward, is that all the disruption that's happening to all of us, all industries, all sizes, companies, all sizes, are just creating a lot of questions for all of us. And it doesn't matter whether you're someone working from home alone, or you're this big international firm, or anything in between. If you work in your own silo, tribe, industry, network, call it whatever you like, you're just less likely to find answers. If you move outside of that, you increase the probability of at least getting different perspectives. So Work Club, as I wrote the idea in 2005, was, how do we get as many of these different kind of people together in one place? And then I started thinking, well, if there is that diversity in one place, how does it need to look and feel and smell, and what's the experiences you have to build around that? And what do you have to do in order to build encounters and conversations between this diversity? Because that's kind of, the space is the easy part, but how do you then bring all of that diversity together without being in their face?
Yep.
Without being too try hard, that it's in a subtle way, and it's a way where we look at it from a different few angles, where we look at it from a bigger perspective, where there's 60 people together, which is our Florence Guild series. You don't get the same intimacy, with that kind of scale, but the idea with Florence Guild is that you at least have a conversation, you have maybe a little bit of friction, good friction, between different perspectives, and it allows you to think about what you have heard and reflect in your own time. And then there's the round tables around our dining tables or boardroom tables, which is only for 8. And the idea is, again, that it's real conversations. You get to know people around the table to an extent that if you are an introvert or extrovert, it doesn't matter. Afterwards, you'll be comfortable enough to go and talk to them. And that's more of an intimacy level. You'll know everybody around the table, being 8, and there's no fluff. We just go straight to the point in terms of the conversations to try and build that trust between the people. And then finally, there's the office hours, which is the one-on-one, which is even more intimate, where members can open up the diary, and other members can book in a time to see them. And that's this kind of one-on-one where you just get to know each other better.
So what was going on in your life when the idea of Work Club came about?
So I was at that time, with a big American firm.
Yep.
In sort of an overall sort of general management role. But one of the things that nobody wanted to do, this was a big firm, 15,000 people, and there was there's a big, pretty interesting department around research.
Yep.
Research on future trends, what's next. And I put my hand up to run that department as well, which got me access to think tanks and amazing people around the world, in the US and Europe and Asia, that had views around what's next from a technology perspective, what's next from a organizational perspective, what's next from a sustainability, all these progressive thinkers that had views around what's around the corner.
Yep. In
terms of major trends. So, and personally, from an early stage, from probably the last 15 years, I've talked about blurring lines. That retail should no longer just be retail, hotel should no longer just be hotel. You should create these environments that is just multi-layered. They may have an anchor, which is retail. They may have an anchor, which is work. But you can do so much more and you should do much more to create experiences and interesting places instead of just boring retail or boring hotel. But you actually layer it and create experiences that's much more interesting, and destinations basically for people to come to.
Yeah, there's actually, when I hear you talk about like everyone should bring them whole selves into work and dress as you are, it reminds me of Sister Act. Have you seen the Sister Act movies?
Yeah, the nuns, is that?
Yeah. And when Whoopi Goldberg at the end, they do their final performance, and she says to all of the like choir, take off your robes, everyone, be as you are, and then they end up like doing an amazing performance and having the best time.
Brilliant.
It kind of, and everyone loves that movie, but it feels like we're actually implementing that here, even though everyone's like actually excited to,
So I've never noticed that. But that's a great analogy, because that's what I say, and that's part of the culture. I think that but it's whether you're a member or whether you're a team member, it's the key for me is that you bring all of yourself. And with this diversity, you can't just pretend, now you're going to wear a suit and now you're going to pretend you're someone who you're not. Yeah. You're going to bring yourself, whatever that is. If you're creative, if you are comfortable in your suit and tie, then you wear that, and that's what you do. If you want to wear something else and you reflect something, you do that. And it's also from a team perspective, I think, I don't want people leaving anything, at the door. I want them to bring in their quirkiness, their own personalities, their own views on what we can do different or better, and challenge the way we work. Because it's changing so fast, and this is not static. No, it's supposed to change. It's supposed to be disrupted. It's supposed to be challenged.
Yep. And do you think also supporting people in doing that would be like understanding, like creating an environment that allows people to be comfortable in bringing all of those elements in, because everyone's not going to want to see all of that necessarily?
Yeah, so I think from a member perspective, I think we do a lot of work in terms of just make people comfortable. It's not pretentious, it's relaxed, you can be yourself. And from a team perspective, I think it's just part of the culture that I'm trying to build, and it's where there's room for people to make mistakes, but where my focus is not the strategy, and a lot of people just think, what's going on, you don't have a strategy. No, I don't, and I don't care. What I care about is the culture and the brand. I have a very tight brand strategy, very clear understanding of what we are and what we're not. And I believe that if the team understands that brand strategy, if you like, that brand, who Work Club is, then the team will make the best decisions 9 out of 10 times. If you know exactly what Work Club represents, you shouldn't be reporting back up, and you shouldn't be saying, can I do this or can I not do this? You should be able to make your decision at the time, real time, and I would be comfortable that that's correct most of the time if you understand the brand. That's what I want, because we need to be able to respond. We need to be able to change real time and not to wait for some outdated organizational structure where it just, you need speed and you need to experiment. And it's one thing that's a sin, is not to experiment.
Yep.
Basically.
So have you always been like that, or did you kind of just like loosen up over time, or start experimenting kind of thing?
So I think I've always been like that, maybe more now. I've dialed it up the last probably 7-8 years since I started my own thing. So I, initially I had my own thing for sort of 10 years. Yep. And then I ended up in this big American monster firm, which was very corporate, but it was a private firm, and in the end I was on the board in the US, and I was kind of allowed to be myself within this big monster. I think because I rebelled a little bit in the beginning, and I just did what I wanted to do, and as long as I could, and as long as I was delivering the numbers, they let me do it, which was so it was an amazing experience, because I had the big company experience of everything that includes, the good things and the bad things, but they let me really just do what I wanted to do. So I changed a lot I changed a lot in the regions where I went in, and I think the style that I brought in is not similar to this. And I think you can do it in a corporate environment. If it's top down, you can. It's coming from top down. You know, if it's not from top down, you can't.
And so was it difficult to move from there, or when was the turning point when you were like, okay, I'm going to just start this work club? Did you have the name already picked out?
So when I left the big American firm, I started something else.
Oh, okay.
So I had a number of years before Work Club started in 2014, and I sort of landed into that. It was a long story, but it was a big joint venture with a big European firm. So it was an Asia Pacific business, and 12-month negotiations to become a partner with them. You know, I had 49.9% of the shares because they were listed in Vienna, and they needed to consolidate for the purpose of the stock exchange there. So I had 49.9%, which I'll never do again, because with that you don't have control. And unfortunately, that, you know, we were set up. It was an Asia Pacific business. I had 7 offices, a lot of people, and running pretty fast. And then the European business went into financial difficulties, and all our products came from Europe, so they were not able to deliver. And then that was the beginning of the end. So that business collapsed. It was quite a significant collapse. It was 2013. So in some ways, I mean, that's what forced me to sort of rethink. And in hindsight, it's the best thing that happened. You know, not at the time. It wasn't great fun, because I had to start from scratch, completely from scratch again. So, and that's where I pulled out the work club idea again. And I've always been passionate about it. I always said, and in 2013, I had a couple of months alone there, just thinking, I'm not going to go back into this industry again. And Work Club was just a natural choice. Spoke to a few people about maybe help funding it, because there wasn't much left. And it was just too hard, because for me it had been this process. It had been in my mind since 2005, and I changed it, you know, along the way, and you know, it had morphed into whatever it was in 2013. And when I spoke to people about it, they were all, you know, skeptical, and no, it's
really?
Yeah, and it's not tangible. It's just an idea. And I thought, well, it's more than an idea. I'm just going to do it myself. So bootstrapped the first site and just self-financed the first site completely, and just the first 10 months, it was exactly 10 months, was not easy, because it took us 10 months to turn a profit. And from that point on, then I could sleep at night, and
really?
basically, you know, it turned, you know, it just grew from there. So, and I'm happy that I started alone with no partners, because it just allowed me to do exactly what I wanted to do. And learning it as well, because in the beginning, I didn't know the industry, I didn't know, you know, and I didn't want to look at perceived competitors, because I've never been interested. You know, I don't want to look at what other people do. I couldn't care less. You know, I think I know what I want to do, and I know that I can't always execute what I want to do. So I'm just going to focus on execute as much as possible and do the things that I think are important for us and for our brand, and not really worry about what other people do. I think there's so much that we can do and that I want to do, that why get disturbed or confused? You know, just focus on this, and then let people do what they want to do themselves.
Just like people's reaction when they came in here when we launched this space on Thursday night. What was that like for you? Because I was thinking, you were sharing with me about how you lock yourself away for a couple of days, you visualize the furniture exactly as you like, and then having it all produced, shipped in. What was that like to have everyone come into the space and feel like really wowed?
So initially it didn't feel much, which is really strange.
Really?
Yeah, because I mean, I saw this 12 months ago, in a way, and I designed it 12 months ago. So it's kind of, I'm already on to you know, the next 3-4 things and think about, oh, how's that going to look and feel, and you know, this took a lot of my headspace 12 months ago, and it was a big part at that time. But now it's kind of almost, you know, in a weird way, I've kind of just moved on, and it's old news, you know. So it was nice to see it, and it was nice to see it the way that I thought it would look. You know, there are always a few things that I want to change from day one, and I just try and make a note of and say, okay, I need to change that for the next one, because it's just an evolution. It's a point in time, and when I look at it today, I've learned things over the last 12 months that I'll do different for the next one. So it's this never-ending thing. So I'm never like jumping up and down and think that's amazing, because I don't actually think it is. You know, I think it's just 12 months ago, that's the best I could do there, and I think there's, you know, learnings now, and the next one will be better.
Sorry, when did you develop a love for furniture, or when did you realise that you were excited by it?
I think it's always been there a bit, probably because I'm born in Denmark, and like in every home in Denmark, whether it's, you know, Denmark is a very equal country, so the middle class is really everything that's there. That's not really a, you know, upper class or lower class. It's pretty much everything's middle class. And everyone have got nice furniture. It's just part of what you do. You buy, you know, you buy a nice sofa, you buy a nice chair, and you don't throw out. You keep it, you know, and you give it to your children, and they, you know, will take it over. So there's always that appreciation. In my home, there was beautiful furniture, and it was a lot of sort of 50s, 60s style, older style too, which is totally normal. So you would not look at it being elitist or like you would here, you know, for people to buy these chairs or to buy this table, they think, oh, this is really expensive, you need money for that. That's the complete opposite thinking to Denmark, where you think it's not about having money, it's just you buy less, and when you do buy that chair, you save up for it, and then you have it for the next 30, 40, 50 years. And that's just a fundamental cultural thing, I think that's in us. And then sort of in the 90s, I ended up started working a little bit with furniture, really nice pieces, and that kind of accelerated the interest. So I like the craftsmanship, you know, I like the stories, you know, the passion that people have in making whether it's steel or whether it's the, you know, whatever it is, the product. I love that. And I think there's you know, it's been a long time where it's just gone to mass production, and it's gone to less of an appreciation of things that are made well and made to last. And the whole movement, so one of the things I ran at this American firm was sustainability as well. And it was all about ticking boxes. You know, really, you need to tick boxes so that you can be perceived as being the most sustainable manufacturer. And, you know, really it's nonsense, because it's not about ticking boxes, it's about not throwing away. It's around buying stuff, furniture, building stuff that will last, quality. It's not elitist, it's not about having money or not money, it's about thinking longer term. And try to, you know, design in a way as well where you don't tear walls down, you don't actually have to do anything to the space, you just move things around, you move furniture around if you need to make changes. But sustainability to me is that you don't throw out, you know, you keep. And that's just ingrained in me, you know, that's just, and I think there's just too much waste in every part of our life, you know, that we throw stuff out, we buy crap and throw it out, throw it out, whether it's fashion, whatever it is, whether, you know, furniture, and craftsmen are disappearing because of it, and we are producing more waste than ever because of it. So all the furniture in Work Club, all the people we work with, I know them. I've been to their workshops. I've seen them, you know, and they've told me their stories. They're passionate about what they do. You know, it's their life. It's not a 9-to-5 thing. It's absolutely from the heart. And I think representing that and bring that in. You know, I know where this comes from, and you know, I know.
Where does this come from?
So
I've been telling people briefly that it was under the water. Oh, you can say it.
Yeah. So no, it's right. So it's so you know, Denmark has got a lot of islands.
Yeah.
So it's got the highest number of islands, I think. Yep. Any country has actually, and there's a lot of ferries and there's a lot of wharfs, but there's a lot of bridges now. Oh. So since all the bridges were built, all these beautiful old ferry wharfs have been closed down, and a friend of mine got to buy a lot of those wharfs, basically the timber. And this is the timber from one of those ferry wharfs. So it's a timber it's a Sobe timber that's more than 100 years old. You can't get Sobe timber today, but it's more than 100 years old. It's been in water for 100 years. It's so dense, it's almost fossilized, you know, so dense that it's actually no longer categorized as timber.
Really?
This table is half a ton.
Yes.
So when you lift it and you think it's timber, it's actually not. It's like rock. So just getting it in here, lifting it off a truck, it's just you need like 3 times the amount of people that you think you do.
Yeah.
You know, this will stand here forever if you want it to. You know, it's going to last forever. You know, I love the history of it. I love the feel of it. Yeah. You know, all the timber we use are just raw timber. Yeah. The same with the leather. You know, nothing is protected. The timber floor it's raw, so it's not. I don't like gloss. I don't like protection. I want to feel. If I touch a handle, I want to feel the timber. Yep. I want to feel it because it's part of. Without sounding too fluffy, it's almost part of the energy. It's almost part of that well-being, the sense of nature. You know, that you feel things are real. This is raw steel. Yep. You know, it's part of creating an environment that where you can be yourself and you can be comfortable, and where it doesn't matter whether it gets marks or, you know, the floor have got heels in it or whatever. It doesn't matter. You know, the floor is 35 mil thick, solid timber. It's gonna last as long as the building will last. So it will have patina, it'll have marks, it'll have red wine stains, it'll have whatever is the history that's been going on, but that's just the history of the place. So why not, you know, show that? I think that's part of the charm on any old place. Yep. In Europe or anywhere you go in the world, you see marks, you see the, you know, signs of history. I love that. Yeah. Why keep it like it was on day one? That's not natural. You know, it's not telling any stories.
Like, what inspires you to keep going? Because you work really long hours. Are you like always in work mode? Do you feel? Because
no, I don't think I'm ever in work mode.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just because it's so I don't feel I'm working. Yeah. It's a passion, you know, and I'm just the weekend sometimes is a bit of a nuisance, you know. But it's not work. I'm very, you know, and it sounds like a cliche or something, but it really isn't. I just love sort of thinking about, okay, what's next, what's out there, and trying to look at some of I'm very fascinated by bigger trends, and just try and explore what the future will look like for the next 5-10 years, and to reflect on that and look at the product we have, look at how we work, how we structure ourselves. It's a constantly it's an emergent system that just constantly changes, and it's just exciting. Yep. So I'm not working, I'm just thinking about new ideas because I enjoy it.
And how do you set yourself up? So now, like, what have you learnt over the years with like fitting so much in, and you always seem like so calm and collected, but I know that you have so much going on. So how do you manage that? Have you always been kind of that way?
I'm quite disciplined, you know. I'm always like a bit. So I know that if I get 8 hours sleep a night, yep. If I go to the gym in the morning early and I eat reasonably well, I'm a machine. You know, I can just go on and on and on.
Yep.
And that's not always the case. You know, I don't always do those three, but I'm pretty. You know, I go to the gym 4 times a week, and that's just my meditation, if you like. It's my way of de-stress, and it's my way of just thinking, whatever happens in my life around me, anything can happen, and I'll do that. Nothing will get me out of whack for that, because that's kind of, it's almost like an anchor. And sleep, if I get my 7-8 hours, you know, I know I'll operate fine. And then I spend time with the kids. You know, I get a lot from the kids, observing them, looking at their minds, you know, the way they think and the way they, you know, react to things. And stress is a funny thing, because of course there's stress at times, you know, there's times where you get stressed, and there's just, you know, a lot of time, deadlines and things like that, but you can only do so much, you know, and you can only do your best, and you make decisions as fast as you can, and, you know, why stress too much about it? You just do what you can do and
enjoy it.
Yeah, you know, and yeah, so I don't think I think stress is. I don't feel stressed. Sometimes I do, but doesn't last long. I don't know why. It's just never done. It just peels off like a water on a dock. I don't know. But it's a wasted emotion, almost. You know, it's like, I think it's the same with frustration. Sometimes frustration is there, but really, you know, the world is complex. You know, and you always, the same thing, sometimes entrepreneurs say, oh, you know, I had a failure, you know, I've had these 4 businesses that's failed, and now, you know, I've learned so much from them. Maybe, you know, maybe not, you know, because the world is a complex place.
Yep.
And, you know, the reason my business failed a couple of years ago, I may look at it from one side, you know, and my world view. But I'm sure there's 80% of other things that I just don't know were happening on the other side, you know, at that time, that I will never be aware of. So what I think I learned and what I think was the reason for whatever happened may not be the full picture. So I don't think you can ever assume that. So I think you just do your best and don't assume you know everything.
Oh, I wanted to ask you about your tattoos.
All right, yes.
Yeah? If any of, like, what have they been inspired by, or when did you start getting tattoos?
Yeah, so it's a little while ago. I started now, so it's 25 years ago, something around that. Started small, you know, the first one took forever to figure out meaning of, and so the first one was actually this Chinese emperor. So there's this author in Denmark called Hans Christian Andersen. He's a fairy tale writer, so a very famous fairy tale writer. He's written a lot of the fairy tale, you know, famous fairy tales. And he said in Danish, which you can't really translate to English, but it's kind of along those lines, to travel is to live. So you can't just, there's basically, so this emperor, the Chinese emperor, 1642, he said it's not enough to read 1,000 books, you also need to travel 1,000 miles. So kind of translated, that's what it meant. And it's similar that Andersen was saying, you can't just study and not travel and be wise. You have to study a little bit and you have to travel to be wise. The same with the emperor, you can't just read a lot of books and be wise, you have to travel as well.
Yep.
Because you know, since I was young, I always traveled. I've always traveled. So in Denmark, it's quite easy. You just jump on a plane and you go anywhere in no time, or you get on a train. So I've been through all of Europe. I've been, you know, and I would just, as early as I was allowed to leave, I would just basically travel. And when I was 18, I left, 1990, and just have traveled an enormous amount. I mean, just because, you know, I wanted to. Yep. I wanted to see different places. And I wasn't that interested in school. So the whole notion of actually you can travel and be smart was probably also an excuse that, you know, I didn't have to do the school. So I left school when I was 18 and never went back. You know, it wasn't really for me. So, and I think, you know, a lot of certainly my cultural understanding have come from just traveling and living and working in these different cultures and understanding the differences. So that was the first tattoo. I kind of represented that on the back. And then from there, I think the longer I've been away from Denmark, the closer I'm getting to that heritage.
Really?
You know, it's sort of pulling back a bit. So the whole history of Denmark. My aunt is, you know, she's one of the senior people for the National Danish Museum. And since I was a little kid, she's dragged me around Copenhagen or in all the museums around Denmark, whether it's Vikings or whatever it is. So, you know, it's been, I've learned a lot about the Danish history and European history through her, and I loved it. So a lot of the other tattoos are sort of Nordic inspired and reflective of different times of my life when I've gone through something or experienced something, and I wanted that to be represented. But I've never given very specific, you know, I want this round thing, I want that. Yep. I've gone to artists who I think are amazing and who have said, this is what I want it to represent. You know, knock yourself out kind of thing.
Yep.
You know, just do what you want to do based on that.
Yep. And is that what you did with Anthony Lister's mural that went up?
Yeah. So Anthony, he did the mural out here. I have this horrible concrete wall, right? 22 meters long, 4 meters high. And it was just a very sad wall. I think we needed a bit of life. And with Anthony, he's incredible, you know, talented. And, you know, just like with the tattoo, I think you don't give too much of a brief. You give a little bit of brief. I say it's a Nordic. I wanted a bit of Viking. I wanted a bit of, you know, he spent a bit of time with me first just to sort of feel my energy, you know, to sort of get an idea of my energy. That was his way of trying to read also what he was trying to do. Yep. So I kind of just let him get a sense for that and gave him a few pointers, but then it was entirely up to him.
Yep. What was your brief that you gave him? Like, what was the few pointers that you
So
gave?
one is, so this club has got a bit more Nordic part to it. We've turned up the Viking part a little bit. So there's a lot of black leather. It's just more Nordic. And I wanted the street art to represent that in some way, but to be the contrast between what is in here quite a polished, you know, not formal, but it's quite polished environment. I wanted a bit of a shock, you know, as part of that, just as a contrast, but still with a Nordic theme. So it's really only a Nordic theme. I'd seen some of his, you know, I love his art. I've seen some of his flying robots and said, how about some flying Vikings, you know, you know, instead. I think that's where he got the flying part from.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, you know, it was just him. Just responding, and he hadn't prepared anything. He drew it all up on a piece of A4, you know, basically on the day, right? And so incredible talented, incredible ability just to respond and just sort of be in the moment and just, you know, create something.
So awesome. I was talking to Anthony when he was painting, and his friend said, who was there, his intern said, Soren wasn't what I was expecting when we came in here. And I said, oh really? And he went, yeah, I didn't expect him to be so friendly with his tats. He's a really cool guy. And then Anthony said, yeah, you can tell that he's a great leader because he puts a lot of courage in others. He said, he put a lot of courage in me. His brief wasn't really specific. Mm-mm. And yeah, he was just like really happy like about that.
But I think in general with the team, what I try to do with the team, and this is, a leader is not about control and command, in my view. It's about inspiring and about trusting and creating a framework where people are comfortable to make their own decisions and allowing people to make those decisions and allowing them to make mistakes as well and know that's going to happen. But if you've done a good enough job in defining who we are, and what is right and what is wrong, yep. You know, in terms of how we behave and how we make decisions, then, like I said before, you know, the concierge, anyone at any level should be empowered and must be empowered to make decisions. I think that's what it's about, and because it will just, people will flourish, people will be more motivated, they will care more. If it's just top down command and control, it's that whole organizational structure is dying, and companies that operate in that way will not be away for long. I mean, I'm really convinced about that, and I think it's not just a nice to have. I think it's an essential to have. It's a survival to actually be able to respond, because the world is changing so fast. And if the team at the front of the business don't have the authority to make real-time decisions, in real time, decisions in real time, you're not going to be able to respond. You're not going to be flexible enough. You're not going to be agile enough to actually respond to what's happening around you. And you need that as a business. So I think a lot about what's the organizational structure like? What's the key parts that we as a business needs to structure ourselves at or be aware of with the future ahead of us, in terms of technology, in terms of how the future of work is really changing everything. So I think that's the fascinating part, and that's what actually I think is the whole, it's an experiment because nobody knows, it's just subjective, what's coming ahead. But Work Club to me is an experiment in terms of how do I deal with the internal part of the business and how do I deal with the external part. And I'm quite clear about how I want to deal with both. But it's changing. But it's basically because I see that these are important parts in order to survive and thrive. And what is the new world in a way.
Have you seen any other businesses want to empower all their team to think like an entrepreneur?
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
I think there are examples of companies out there, but again, I've sort of I don't read books, business books anymore, because again, I'm kind of I'm not that interested. I think I'm more interested in philosophy and technology and understanding what kind of, what's out there and how does that change, or how could that change the way we operate. The sort of looking at other case studies, I'm sure could be helpful, but like I said, I'm not too interested really. It's more, I have enough ideas to how I want to change and how I want to operate, that I don't really want to get distracted.
Through experiences and what's here now.
Yeah, and just look at this now, and I have enough views on what I think is right or wrong, and whether that's going completely against what everybody else is doing, I don't care, or if it's the same that everybody else is doing, it doesn't matter to me. It's just, it is what I think is right for Work Club, for us, for me, what I want to represent, and the way I want it to be.
I always hear when you talk about people having courage and having guts or follow their gut instinct, and your face lights up and you're like, good, great, someone's doing it, perfect. Do you think that you've become braver over time and that you're more in tune with your own kind of gut instinct, that you're that?
Yeah, probably something to do with age as well. You get to 46, you get a bit more experience, but and just follow your gut feel more as well. And it does excite me when people take action. They do things. The worst part to me is just seeing people just not doing anything. Just come in as a robot and just leave again, and not being proactive, not coming up with ideas. That to me is a sin. And that's not what I want to see or represent. It's much more exciting when ideas are coming out, and like I always did myself, I would always ask for forgiveness afterwards. If it was something that maybe wasn't quite, but I would go ahead and do it first, because I knew that it maybe would have been a no or something if I can't through the normal way. But sometimes you're just going to push the boundaries a bit, and allow other people to do it too.
And what is your like advice for someone who has a startup or someone who has an idea and they haven't actioned it yet and they're not in the job that they wish they were doing? Like, what would your advice be?
So we have a membership called Side Project, because my assumption is everybody has a side project.
Yep.
Of some sort. So it's hard to say, because it's very specific to that person. It's very specific to that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't just say, go for it, knock yourself out, and just, if it's a bad idea, it's a bad idea. It's not going to work. So I think it's more, don't just be a dreamer. You got to be realistic. You got to feed your family. You got to feed yourself.
Yep.
There's some realistic parts there, but also have courage to jump out if you really believe in yourself. The first part is always scary, but it's incredibly liberating at the same time. When you jump out, there's an unknown, and there's risks. People perceive risks in a different way. My acceptance of risk is probably quite extreme on one side, and I'm very comfortable with that.
Yep.
My wife, for example, is right on the other side. So, there's always some people operate really comfortably with risk, and others don't. So I think it comes back to that sort of personality and understanding yourself, and are you going to enjoy that? Are you going to thrive, or are you going to just, is it going to be a really horrible experience? Yep. It's not for everyone to do the wrong thing. Initially it's survival. It is about survival once you get to a point where you're cash positive. Yep. So there's some hard facts, there's some hard things you're just going to make sure that you have some confidence in. Otherwise, what's the worst that can happen? You go back and work somewhere again, right? That's, and sometimes we think, it's going to be a disaster, I have this great job, or I can't do that. But really, when you boil it down, and the same with me, it's like, I'm not afraid of losing what I've built up again, or I've lost everything once, and came from, quite a significant position actually, and went down. It didn't change my happiness, didn't change anything. It was hard for a little while in terms of just practical things, but it's not. I think if you get a bit more detached from that part, just follow what you like, and your passion. I think generally, if you do something that's in your passion or that you're interested in, you do well. Yep. Naturally.
Because you keep rising.
Yeah, you keep rising. Occasion. And even, if I look back at the last 25, 26 years, everything I've done, I've actually, 30 almost, I've really enjoyed. I've enjoyed every part of it. Yep. Not a particular planned path in any way, but just, there's nothing that I would regret. Anyway, I've just enjoyed it. And until I haven't enjoyed it, I've moved on to something else. Yep. And of course, there's periods that are harder than others. But that's just life, right? It's just part of life.
Like, I just wanted to know, is there something that you always draw back to when you're in a difficult moment, or where you feel conflicted? Do you have a saying or someone from history that's an inspiration that you pull back to, and then that motivates you?
Not that I always come back to, but I have a saying which I really like.
Okay.
And it's a Japanese saying. Yep. So it's wabi sabi, which is basically perfection is in the imperfection. I think nothing is perfect, and particularly with older things, I think that's the passionate part. Mm-hmm. The fact that things are used, they're old, but they're quality, and they carry a history. That's almost the perfection in the imperfection. Mm-hmm. I think, and I love that. So that's almost the essence of also everything here: the rawness, the authenticity with everything that's here.